We've covered the idea of grouping, and in some ways, groups and components look and behave the same. They both act as a single object that can be moved, copied, and rotated. But the big difference comes when you edit them. Groups are unique, so any copy of a group will be a unique copy. Components, however, are instanced, so all copies will be affected when you edit any one of them. You should always combine your geometry into either groups or components, and the general rule is to make a component of anything that will be copied. The default shortcut key for components is G, or you can create them through a right-click menu. When you create the component, you'll be prompted right away to name it. This is always a good practice to keep your models organized, and we'll explore some of these other settings later. Let's create this component now. You can copy and paste a component, but you can also make copies with the Move tool by moving the component and tapping the Control key on Windows or the Option key on a Mac for a copy. We'll learn more about copying with the Move tool later. We just need a few copies of this pillar for now. Let's edit any one of these pillars, and as with groups, to edit a component, the best method is to use the selection arrow and double-click on the component, which then shows the dotted line editing box. Click away from the component to close it. Double-click to edit, click outside the component to close it. In our example, these center pillars could be wider to match the connection to the arch. If I select these 4 pillars, I can right-click on one of them and choose Make Unique. This will break the connection to the original components, which can be seen if we make a few changes. To see this in a different view, open the Components browser from the Window menu. Here, we can see the original pillar component and the unique copy we made. Let's make another one unique to see how it will also be added to the Components browser. The Components browser is an important tool in managing and finding new components. Here, you can place components in your model simply by selecting them in the browser and then clicking in your model to place a component. You can rename the components or change the way your library is viewed. Here you can also explore beyond the components you have created. The desktop version of Sketchup has a sampler library you can explore, and both the desktop version and web version have a search bar where you can search the 3D warehouse, which houses millions of user-created models. You do need to be online for this search to work, but the 3D warehouse is an absolutely fantastic resource for finding SketchUp models that you can load directly into your model. Because there are millions of models, it will help your search to be specific for the types of models you are looking for. And be aware that the quality of models can vary greatly from simple to very highly detailed models. Finding really detailed components can help make your scene look great, but be careful as well. Loading a bunch of heavy models will quickly bloat your model size and will impact the performance of SketchUp as well. If you'd like to manage the components in your scene, click on the Home tab in the Component browser to view all the components you have created or added to the model. To delete one, you can right-click on any component in the browser and delete it, which will also delete any instances of that component. You can also right-click on a component, choose to Select Instances, which picks all loaded copies in your scene, and then swap those components for another by right-clicking on a different component and choosing Replace Selected. It can also be useful at times to purge the browser, which will remove any component that is not currently loaded in your scene. let's talk about component nesting. We introduced nesting when talking about groups. It's the idea that you can take multiple groups or components and combine them into a larger group or component. For example, if you open the component nesting file, we have this table and chairs, and they are already components. I could select them all and group them to make it easy to move around as a single object, which is a simple use of nesting. But we can also be strategic in how we nest objects to make our models more efficient. If I double-click to edit, down through the nesting levels, I can open the large group that we just created and move around the chair components. And then edit one of the chair components, which is also made up of a series of components. So we could delete one of the back slats for all of the chairs at once. And the back slats are also components. So we could edit one of those to affect the actual geometry and perhaps make them all thinner with push-pull. At this point, we are 3 levels deep into a nested group or component, so we'd need to click outside 3 times to close that many levels. In this example, we have a mix of groups and components nested together, but there isn't one nesting strategy that works best for everyone. Some SketchUp experts prefer to use and nest components only, and others use a varied mix of components and groups together, and they may use different strategies for different models. We'll explore more of those nested strategies in a later course after we learn more about the Move tool, arrays, and the Scale tool. But we did want to introduce the idea of nesting so you can try it out on your own. There are 2 other topics that we're going to delay for a later course as well. One is creating Face Me components. In this office example, you can see that as I orbit around, the people automatically orbit as well to try and face the camera. These are called Face Me components, and there are some special considerations when creating them. The other type of component is a cutting component, often used as windows. You can see that we have some here, which seem to be cutting an opening through this wall. But in fact, if I erase one, the wall is healed, and if I copy one, it will automatically align to any surface I want to place it on. Creating this type of component must be done in a very specific way, so we'll cover that as well in a later course.